This is Jennifer Fink's story on the pandemic. Jennifer, you said your passion is empowering others through information, which is one of the reasons I wanted to hear your story. However, there are three other reasons. You were a registered nurse,
Mm-hmm.
you homeschooled three boys,
Four.
Four boys, and
Four.
today you are a writer, which means you've developed some remote worker techniques. And all of these, I think, will provide some insight to people in those situations. So welcome, Jennifer Fink.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you again, but I wish it wasn't under these circumstances and for this specific reason.
Tell me how the pandemic has affected you.
So in some ways, I do feel like I have a unique skill set that has positioned me pretty well for this. I happen to be an introvert. I happen to really like being at home. So I had that part down. I already worked from home. I already did a lot of virtual communications, had that down. My work so far is stable. Because of my healthcare background, I do a lot of health writing. That's in demand right now. I'm taking advantage of that while I can. Because we homeschooled for 7.5 years, I'm used to having children home and working with children in the house. But I am still finding this a challenge. And it's interesting for me to realize that even with that background, this is hard. And I imagine that it is so much harder for people that don't have experience working from home, working with kids in the house, or trying to guide their kids through their education.
Well, I know my son has said he's got ones that are a little older, a younger one, but ones that are a little older, like 21 and 23. And he says they're going a little stir crazy, particularly the real social one.
Right. One advantage I think our kids have is that in a lot of ways, they were and are ahead of us in terms of connecting via all kinds of digital mediums, right? So it kind of strikes me as funny, actually, that 3 months ago, we were yelling at our kids and telling them, put down the phone. Or we were all upset when our kids were playing Fortnite and video chatting with each other while playing Fortnite and yelling into the headphone. And now that's exactly what we want them to be doing.
True.
But like all kids, right? As soon as somebody tells you you can't do something, that's the thing you want to do most in the world. And so this is very difficult. I know that my teenagers have struggled with this for a couple of reasons. First of all, as a teenager, you feel invincible, period. That's been true for every teenager throughout the history of the world. That's part of adolescence. It allows teens to take the risks that they need to become adults. Teenagers also are drawn to spending time with their peers. It's part of the package. Their peers are more important to them than their family in some ways. You and I both know that family remains important to them, but when you're a teenager, you are much more inclined to want to spend time with your friends than your family, period. That's all totally normal stuff. And then here we are in the middle of a pandemic that can seem very not real to our children, depending on where we're living. We are in rural Wisconsin, so things haven't really gotten bad here yet. And they likely won't get as bad as they are in New York City, simply because we don't have that kind of density of population. So trying to explain to my kids why this social distancing is important at the stage in their life when they don't want to listen to me anyway is a huge challenge.
And then you've got the little ones. My daughter has one who's 6, and she really doesn't get it. And yet she is doing some, really hanging on to her mother, wants to just be a little wood tick with her.
Yes. One tip that I learned through my years of working at home and homeschooling, and my kids were much younger, of course, at the time, is that concentrated attention is really helpful. So right now, we are all feeling a little bit on edge. The adults, the children, each in our own way. And then we feed off of each other too. your kids know when you're feeling upset or stressed. They certainly know that you're off your routine. So it's totally natural that they want to be with you more. You are their sense of comfort and security. And at the same time as the adult, you're feeling pulled if you need to work from home. You're likely very concerned about money. So balancing that's tough. So one thing that I used to do is I would make it a point to deliberately spend some face time doing something with my children, whether that was, playing with Play-Doh. Like I said, they were much younger, playing with Play-Doh, making a project, reading a book, whatever thing they wanted to do that with them for a period of time. And then it was almost like I filled up their contact tank for a while. And then they were ready for some time to do something on their own. And then I could work on my thing. And I would have to alternate that throughout the day, kind of take turns, concentrated time with them, get something done for me, concentrated time, and keep going.
I think that's what she's going to do, because she said, yeah, there's a few free online programs, but at this age, it's hard to keep them doing something like that, even watching a video for a longer period of time.
There are so many of us that are wondering how to do this right now. And we're looking around to each other for ideas, which is really smart. But there's so many ideas and thoughts and recommendations out there. It's almost overwhelming. I've seen, I think, a little bit shy of 1 billion different schedules, that you can structure your day this way, and all kinds of options for online learning, fun videos, educational tours, virtual field trips. It's great that's all out there, but in the end, your kid is a unique human being, and so are you. So what works for one kid or one family might make yours miserable. My brother posted this extremely detailed schedule on a spreadsheet, 15-minute increments for his daughter, who is in 2nd or 3rd grade. And my brother's an accountant, so I made fun of him because this is the most accountant thing ever. His daughter needs structure. She finds comfort in that schedule. It's working for them. That will not work in my house. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, I don't think it would work in hers as well.
And it takes a lot of time and experimentation. It's a little easier for me to almost feel superior, to pat myself on the back and say, yeah, I've homeschooled. I know how to do this. I've got this down. But I went back and I found something that I wrote in my early days of homeschooling. I journaled. And I was completely, totally, and utterly overwhelmed. And this was when we made a choice to homeschool. We chose to do it. And we also had the option of, going places, doing interesting things. And even so, within 2 days, I was in tears. My kid was in tears. I ended up getting very sick that week. And, no, it wasn't coronavirus. This was years ago. But you know how when you get stressed out, your body just stops? I think that happened to me. By the end of the first week, he was wanting to go back to school. And I'm like, why are we doing this? What am I doing? Am I ruining him for life? We had to push through that. And I learned, for me, the key was to relax and watch him. Let him learn. Let him follow his interest. Support his inquiries. Now, that was a lot easier to do as a homeschool parent who had complete responsibility for her child's education than it is for parents right now who are trying to implement what the school is wanting them to do. That's a huge difference for me. And frankly, I'm struggling with that as well.
Yes, and we're also focused on academics for our kids. We want them to get into the good schools. We want them to, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking that must put an extra level of panic on parents that are thinking, oh my God, now I'm the teacher? Give me a break.
As somebody who has also written about education for various publications, one of the things that I do worry about this period is I'm afraid it's going to exacerbate some of the inequity issues that we already have in education, right? So frankly, the kids who live in homes with educated parents who have big vocabularies and lots of books and access to the internet and documentaries and TV, they are going to learn and grow and continue to move ahead regardless of if I sit down and make them do the assignments that the school sends. It's going to happen. If you have a kid who is in a home where there's not enough food, never mind books, and you've got a stressed out parent who may also be struggling with addiction, that kid is going to suffer a lot more than mine. And when we do come back together, when we as a country and as a world get through this and we do come back together in schools and communities, schools are going to have to figure out how to support and navigate through that.
That's very true. Do you actually know anybody that has been tested positive?
I have a friend who has a friend who tested positive. I do believe I had it, Nan. I was traveling in February. My husband and I went to the island of Dominica in the Caribbean. And this was out in the world at the time. You know, we were aware it had been in China, and we talked about should we wear masks. And I'm a health writer, so I did the research. The research said, you know what, those surgical masks really don't help. So we didn't. We went, we had a fantastic vacation. We scuba dived. We were there for carnival. We hiked. It was fantastic. But our last full day in Dominica, I came down with a very high fever and a terrible cough. And I Googled symptoms. Of course, you know, middle of the night, what do? Coronavirus symptoms. And at that point, all it said was, you know, cough, fever, shortness of breath. Well, I wasn't short of breath. And what am I going to do anyway? And when it came time for us to leave the island and to go home, the only screening anybody was doing at that point in time was the airplane asked, had you been in mainland China in the last 2 weeks? Nope, hadn't been there. And because I did have a cough, I was trying so hard not to cough while I was traveling. I didn't want anybody looking at me. I didn't want to take any chances. There were people coughing all over at the airport and at the ferry terminal. And certainly that's not all coronavirus. There's a million reasons why people cough, but that was my realization that this thing is moving quicker than we are. And
maybe you will be immune to it because you've been through a little of it, possibly.
I'm hoping. I'm kind of mentally and psychologically betting on that right now because I think that's what I had. And if I did, then I should have some immunity. So personally, I'm not going crazy about bringing in my mail or going out to get groceries and feeling the need to disinfect my groceries. I could be betting completely wrong. I could have had influenza. I could have had anything else. None of us knows. And as somebody who has been a healthcare provider and who continues to cover healthcare, it is utterly infuriating to me that even today, it is still so hard for people to get tests, to get reliable results, that our healthcare providers don't have the masks they need to safely care for these patients. I am irate about that.
And we're stepping up, but slowly. Mm-hmm. For instance, I was listening to the news last night, and there's this guy who's a fashion designer, and he wants to keep his people employed, and now he is making masks. So if we can get more of the big companies involved in making ventilators, you know, that's what needs to be done.
But this should have been done before, and that's what's so frustrating. I am working on an article right now for a client, and it's talking about crisis standards of care and crisis planning. So as part of the research, you know, I've been digging into recommendations, and Nan, I'm looking at things that were out 10 years ago that we're talking about the need for coordinated crisis planning, healthcare, hospitals, healthcare systems, communities, state, federal, because you don't have time to create this in the middle of a crisis. Now, some of these pieces were certainly in place, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for the healthcare providers who are out there doing their thing. But I feel that we as a country have put them in a terrible position. And I think that's a shameful thing.
I agree with you. I agree with you totally. It's one of those things that you would like to be able to control, but you can't.
Right.
And so you are keeping your fingers crossed that somebody is listening and maybe doing something. When they did away with the pandemic office in the federal government a few years ago, that's what really is the big piece of the problem. But it's the past,
Right.
and we can't change that. All we could do is do something now for the future. So what I'm trying to do is try to give people ideas, not what did you say, 1 million or billion ideas?
I said a billion.
Out there. But tell real stories of people, because I think it's that feeling of, oh gosh, maybe it's only me, and of course
Right.
It isn't. But other than the news and the stories we hear there, we're not really hearing about how the average person like you and me, are just surviving day to day.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if we can just share some of that and we can talk about it and not just hide from it or fuel fear,
Mm-hmm.
think, hey, it's the reality. How am I going to deal with this sucker?
One thing that I have had to remind myself multiple times, and I'm sure I will continue to have to do so, we all process and respond to information in different ways. So I found myself getting really frustrated with my kids because they didn't seem to be taking this seriously at all. I try and tell them, you should care. What about grandma and grandpa? All those kinds of things. They're not where I am. And that's okay. They're different people. They are handling it in their way. So I think we all have people in our life. Some people are really angry right now, or really sad right now, or they're vacillating between emotions as the news comes. I know that I've gone through a lot in, a day. I can go through a lot of that. So I think we all have to consciously remind ourselves that we all take in and process information differently. And then the other thing, when I find myself getting overwhelmed and, I, like so many people, I have had nights where I'm laying in bed trying to sleep and my head is racing and my eyes pop open. Wow, I might not see my parents again. I'm in Wisconsin. They're in Arizona. They're snowbirds. If they get sick, I can't go there. Holy shit. Like that's, wake you up kind of stuff. And I have to pull myself back sometimes and just remind myself, okay, you're fine. You are fine right now. You're in your bed. You are safe. You are warm. You have a house. You have food in your house. Just you're okay right now. There are so many things going on and it's happening what feels like so quickly. It's easy to get lost in that and caught up in it. And so I have to bring myself into the moment. And I've had to do it many moments during the day, but I do find that helps.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, you have said you are not really a person that schedules yourself minute to minute.
Right.
So what are some tips for being a remote worker? Now, I could say it, especially if you have dogs and kids on your lap, but I'm not going to say that. Just in general, what are some tips?
Personally, as somebody who is not a schedule minute by minute person, I find having dogs and kids helpful because they force me to get up and stick to a loose routine. Anybody who has kids or a dog know they let you know when they're hungry or when they need you. So that has some loose structure to my day. I am very deadline driven. My work is project based. So I kind of plot out and prioritize what things I need to get done in a day. I don't necessarily slot a specific time for everything, but I know these are the things I have to get done today. That isn't always enough to get me working on them. So another trick that I use quite often is I will use a timer. You may have heard of the Pomodoro technique. Are you familiar with that?
No, but I'm just laughing because I have set my alarm twice today to get dressed, A, B, get in here.
Yes. The Pomodoro technique was developed by somebody, and you can look that up, anybody who's listening. I don't know the whole history, but basically you set a timer for 25 minutes, you concentrate on whatever you're doing for those 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. And then you do it again, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And I think the official Pomodoro idea is that you do like 4 of those sessions, and then you take a longer break. But the whole idea is that if I will set a timer and say, okay, I'm going to work on this for this long, and mentally knowing that I've got a stop in mind, it helps me get into it and stop thinking about everything else.
Yeah, I get into this office that you see right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in here all day. I mean, working on the podcast stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And on, of course, my regular business, redoing a seminar or, things like that, talking to our CEO about how things are going. But still, this kind of became my world right here.
Yep.
Before anything happened.
Same.
So I'm not feeling so much of a difference because of that, I think.
That's true for me, except what I struggle with, and I struggled with this before. So like you, I have a home office. I do a lot of work on my computer, a lot of connecting virtually, a lot of email. Well, as well as I do, this little computer is a magical device that can also take me down all kinds of distraction avenues. And that's all too easy to do even on a good day, to find yourself watching a YouTube video, or I get lost on Twitter, or I chat with a friend and it goes on too long. Add in the pandemic and news flashes that are coming quicker than I ever imagined news flashes could come. I find myself much more distractible, and it's been harder to focus. So I had a pretty productive day on Monday this week. Tuesday was not hardly productive at all. So yesterday I had to work really, really hard because Tuesday wasn't. We're going to see how today goes, Nan. I've got 2 deadlines tomorrow, so I have to do it, and I think that will help me. But I don't think any of us can realistically expect the same level of productivity out of ourselves. We have to realize that our brains and our souls are struggling to process, and we need time for that.
Well, I think when we don't have any reference points,
Mm-hmm.
you say your kids are handling it differently than you are. And part of that goes back to reference points. And we have all these obscure or different reference points in our heads that they don't even have.
Right.
But they're not the same reference points. So it's not like we can say it's duplicative and therefore this is how we did it before and therefore this is how we will do it again. It seems like that's a piece of the pie.
Yeah, we are literally in unprecedented territory.
Yeah.
I have never lived in a time when the United States has shut down like this. Never.
Nobody has.
Right?
It's still living.
If you had asked me 6 months ago if this was a possibility, I likely would have bet on no.
Not here.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why we're all reeling so much, because yes, we heard what was going on in China, but honestly, I think most of us thought it was going to be like MERS and like SARS before, where it would stay over there.
Yeah, not come across the ocean.
Right? And that thinking is being revealed as pretty naive and uninformed. But honestly, I think that's what I thought.
Yeah, I think I did too. Well, I've got one more question to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we will be having a different point of view or reacting differently if someone close to us test positive and especially if they're older?
I do. I think that as this disease comes closer and closer, it is going to start seeming much more real to people.
Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons why we all hate cancer is because we know people that it has ravaged,
Yeah.
people it has harmed. We have seen what that loss does to families. And I'm afraid that it's going to be like that here too. Wisconsin had their first death from coronavirus about a week ago now, I believe. And I posted that news. There were 2 deaths that day. I posted that news on my Facebook. And within the hour, I found out that I knew somebody who was related to the first man who died. The world is small.
Yeah, it is.
The
It is.
world is small. And all of these people matter.
Well, Jennifer, I love talking to you. I always have. You know, I haven't known you that long, but every time I talk to you, I could go on for a long, long time. So thanks so much for taking the time. And maybe we'll circle back around in a couple of months and find out where we are then.
That's a good idea. Meanwhile, I encourage everybody to breathe and please give yourself and give each other grace right now. We all need that.
Thanks so much.